cleansing blood, just in simple faith to plunge me neath the healing, cleansing flood. Jesus, Jesus, how I trust him, how I prove him more and more. Jesus, Jesus, precious Jesus, oh, for grace to trust him more. I'm so glad I learned to trust him, precious Jesus, Savior, friend. And I know that thou art with me, will be with me till the end. Jesus, Jesus, how I trust him, how I proved him more and more. Jesus, Jesus, precious Jesus, oh, for grace to trust him more.
Okay, you guys can remain standing while we sing Friend in the Fire.
You can get better from the flames, you can get hurt, you can get worn out and lost cause you got burned. But when you see the hand of God reaching through the fire, He can raise you from the ashes and make you new again. Forge me in the flames, bend my desires, I yield my will. Refine me in the fire, whatever it takes to take me higher. You've never forsaken me, you stayed through the heat. You're a friend in the fire. I've lived and I've lost the ones I love. I've looked to the sky and asked God, why was my faith not enough? But then I saw the hand of God reaching through the fire. He pulled me from the ashes and made me new again. Forge me in the flames, bend my desires, I heal my will. Refine me in the fire, whatever it takes to take me higher. You've never forsaken me, you stayed through the heat. You're a friend in the fire. Everything I love, the thief tried to take away. But when I ran into the cross, it changed everything. Now I know I serve a God who is for me, never leaves me, nor forsakes me. Forge me in the flames, bend my desires, I yield my will. Refine me in the fire, whatever it takes to take me higher. You've never forsaken me, you stayed through the heat. You're a friend in the fire. Forge me in the flames, bend my desires, I yield my will. Refine me in the fire, whatever it takes to take me higher. You've never forsaken me, you stayed through the heat. You're a friend in the fire. Friend in the fire. Friend in the fire.
be seated.
Investors, good morning. Have you been enjoying the services so far? I'm not convinced, but I'm glad to hear that. So I have especially been enjoying the love stories that Michael's been sharing, because I'm a little bit of a sucker too. I like a good soppy love story, but a good one. Not like you said, these infatuation, just a little bit of romance, but the real true love stories. And of course he's been sharing with us that the biggest and the best love story is the one between you and Jesus, that he gave his life because he loved you so much. Do you believe that you are his beloved? Do you believe that? Sometimes we look in the mirror and we're like, I'm a little bit overweight, or the skin doesn't look so great, or I'm not as bright as this kid in class next to me, and we're comparing ourselves. And so we start to own these things that we say about ourselves. It's not always what other people say about us. It's sometimes what we say about ourselves. We own those things. This song is called Belovedness, and it's about starting to claim and own our title as beloved of God. So I hope this song blesses you as it did me when I heard it the first time. You've owned your fear and all your self-loathing. You've owned the voices inside of your head. You've owned the shame and reproach of your failure. It's time to own your belovedness. You've owned your past and how it's defined you. You've owned everything everybody else says. It's time to hear what your Father has spoken, and it's time to own your belovedness. He says you're mine. I smiled when I made you. I find you beautiful in every way. My love for you is fierce and unending. I'll come to find you, whatever it takes, my beloved. You've owned the mess you see in the mirror. You've owned the lies that you're just not enough. You've been so blinded by all your comparing. It's time to own your belovedness. He says you're mine. I smiled when I made you. I find you beautiful in every way. My love for you is fierce and unending. I'll come to find you, whatever it takes, my beloved. You are completely loved and fully known. Beloved, believe he died to make your heart his home. And he says you're mine. I smiled when I made you. I find you beautiful in every way. My love for you is fierce and unending. I'll come to find you, whatever it takes. He says you're mine. I smile
Thank you. Thank you, Miss Joanne. And our worship team that got it together. You guys did well. Thank you for that. Every time you told us to stand up, it was no problem. And then you said, you may sit down. My legs thought, you may sit down, but we're not going to take you there. That warrior race will do something to you. Hey, congrats. Where was our victor at there? And where's your partner at? Yeah, who was the better of the two? I mean, who carried who? I saw you kind of carry him through some of those parts. So, well, just kidding. No, you guys did great. And those who did an extra loop out in the woods, kudos to you. And the famous last words of Heino, and no problem. You just stick to the caution tape or whatever. Yeah, exactly. Got an extra loop in the woods on that. But for all the finishers, 2K, 5K, extra K, y'all, good on you. We're in the 6th most famous story in the Bible today. All right, we got number 1, we've got the crucifixion. Knew that. Number 2, David and Goliath. Number 3, the Nativity. Number 4, Jonah and the whale. Number 5, Adam and Eve. And number 6, Daniel in the lion's den. Yep. So it's in Daniel chapter 6. Daniel chapter 6. And that's how you remember it's the 6th most popular story in the Bible. Daniel chapter 6, the 6th most popular. So there we go. Daniel chapter 6. Got your Bibles going. Reminds me, this story reminds me of a story, a short story. I heard 2 boys walk into a dentist's office. And the first boy comes up to the doctor and says, "Doc, could you pull out a tooth today? No gas, no Novocaine, we just need it pulled out. Would you pull it out?" And the doctor kind of stepped back. The dentist said, "Woo, not used to seeing this kind of courage in boys your age." But the young boy said, "Doc, would you do it? Needs to be out." The doc said, "All right, I'll pull it out. Which one is it? Open up. Tell me which one it is." And with that, the first boy pointed over his shoulder. "Hey, Jimmy, show him which one it is." We all like the idea of courage of, oh yeah, come on, get it. No gas, no Novocaine, just get that tooth yanked out. As long as it's him, not me. It's always got to be the other guy. So when we read Daniel and the lion's den, we think, wow, what amazing courage. I mean, this guy had some courage. Glad it wasn't me. Daniel chapter 6. Let me give you a little historical context of Daniel chapter 6. Daniel chapter 6, much like Daniel chapter 3, do you remember Nebuchadnezzar put up the image, invited everyone, all the leadership across his kingdom to come and worship this image, which was highly unusual. They didn't force worship in Babylon. You could pick your god or gods and it was okay. Everyone worshiped some god, as everyone worships some god today, but you could pick your god. Well, that was spurred on by turmoil. Now, Daniel chapter 6, by political turmoil, Daniel chapter 6 is also political turmoil. Now, Daniel chapter 6 precedes in chapter order Daniel chapter 7, but Daniel chapter 7 actually happens back when Belshazzar is king of Babylon. Daniel chapter 6 happens when the Medes and the Persians have already taken over. Daniel chapter 6 chronologically happens after Daniel chapter 7, but Daniel put those chapters together, giving us Daniel chapter 6 before we get to Daniel chapter 7 because he wants us to know the story of Daniel chapter 6 before we read Daniel chapter 7. Daniel chapter 7 gives us the apocalyptic picture of the times and the powers that are going to bring about this apocalyptic movement at the very end of time. But Daniel chapter 6 explains how people will pass through that time. Remember Mark Finley's quote? Prophecies tell us who and when, but the stories tell us how. So what's happening? What's happening in Daniel chapter 6? Well, it's huge religious turmoil, religious and political turmoil. Nabonidus, so you have Nebuchadnezzar, son Nabonidus, and then Nabonidus' son Belshazzar. Well, Nabonidus was more of the warrior. Apparently, Belshazzar was more of the religious defier and party boy back home. But Nabonidus, when the Medes and the Persians began to chip away at the Babylonian Empire, he did what any thinking person would do at that point, and that was to collect the gods from the edges of the kingdom, and he began to stockpile them in Babylon. So everybody around the kingdom ended up with empty temples with no gods in them, because as the conquering forces came, they didn't want to lose their gods, number one. Number two, the more gods you have concentrated in one place, the more protection you would have. That just makes sense. So Nabonidus amassed all the gods in the city of Babylon, with the idea that when the Medes and the Persians get there, with that amount of gods in that city, there is no way that they could take it. It would, in the end, be saved, if nothing else, that city. So here you have an entire kingdom with godless temples. That seems insignificant to us, but if that's your God, if that's the God that provides for your family, the God that gives you children, the God that gives you a future, the God that gives you a spouse, if that's the God that gives you everything, and now it's missing in Babylon, you're a little ticked. So when the Medes and the Persians take over, they take over a kingdom full of ticked people. They've all lost their gods. All right? Seems no problem. Just send the gods home. Well, the problem is, as Darius was setting up his kingdom, of course, when the Medes and the Persians take over from the Babylonian, there's going to be a change in systems, civil systems. A few laws are going to be changed. Hey, things are going to be happening different around here. Well, that starts that we don't like change. So some of us get a little like, I liked it the old way. And so there's this civil unrest, as it were. And there's already religious unrest because they're missing their gods. Well, it takes a little time for Darius to get all the gods back, because you can't just Amazon this thing or 2-day ship this thing on some sort of carrier. When God leaves a temple, you have to have a ceremony. And as you take them, then you have to stop at certain points and have ceremonies where you are appeasing these gods, because these gods don't like to be treated roughly. They don't want to just be shipped and carried and thrown around. You've got to treat these gods to keep them happy. And so they would, at every town that they would pass through, there would be celebrations and kind of moments of recognition that these gods, you God, are the great God. And they would just have these programs for them all the way out. So Darius is sending the gods back, but it's not happening very quickly. And the empire, having just gone through a major shift in who's king, and now a shift in its religious. There's no God to worship in the temple. Do you go to the temple if there's no God? Nobody could figure it out. So there's this civil and religious unrest. In the context of that, Daniel chapter 6, the administrators, these are the counselors to the king. The satraps tried to find grounds for charges against Daniel. They hated Daniel, his conduct of government affairs, but they were unable to find anything that was wrong with how he did business. Daniel did his job well. He served the best of his ability. So whenever you've heard me say, hey, look, our problem is not presidents or popes or kings, it's true. That's not our problem. But we can still serve our communities faithfully. whether it's a local or national. And Daniel was doing that. He was serving faithfully, and they were unable to find any mistakes in his conduct. Now, politicians are famous for being dishonest, and so they thought, well, there's some dirt we can find on this man. But there was no dirt. He was honest. There was no personal gain through dishonesty, and so they were unable to do so. They could find no corruption in him because he was trustworthy and neither corrupt nor negligent. There's a word for us, negligent. He wasn't lazy. He was faithful to his task. Well, they kind of huddle back up. What do we do? We got this goody two-shoes. There's nothing wrong with him. He's a hard worker. He's honest. There's not a single thing that we can complain about. So what do? They say, well, what about this unrest that's going on, this civil and religious unrest? How can we use that to our advantage? And in verse 5, finally, these men came to, after who knows how many meetings, we will never find any basis for charges against this man, Daniel, unless it has something to do with the law of his God. And that is way more important than we probably give it credit for. There is no complaints they can find against him, except as it comes to the law of his God. Remember, these stories, these narratives are coupled with prophecies that have apocalyptic, that is, end-time implications. They are describing the end time. And here's a time of political and religious unrest in which a group of people say, we don't like these people. Let's use the unrest that's going on as an excuse to come after them. What are we going to come after them? Well, there's nothing wrong with them. They're great citizens. They participate. They support their community. They're hardworking, honest people. That's the testimony that the church should have. God forbid that we have other testimonies that we're swindlers and dishonest, lazy, taking advantage of people. Daniel's testimony is the testimony the church should have. He's honest, full of integrity. There's nothing wrong with this man. The only thing they can accuse us of, the only thing they could accuse Daniel of, was something to do with the law of his God. And so they said, let's go for it. Let's use that to leverage accusations against verse 12. No, verse 10. Daniel 6, verse 10. When Daniel learned that the decree had been published, so they went to the king, they said, hey, king, we've got a great idea. You know how there's all this political unrest, religious unrest, all these people in the kingdom, in the cities don't have their gods. They're angry because Babylon has all the gods. And what's Babylon? Why can't our city have our God back? And it's taking a while to get to them. Why don't we make a decree that everybody worships you, king? Unheard of. The Medes and the Persians did not require the subjects to work. The kings were not gods. Now there was other empires where rulers became gods, but not in the Persian Empire. They were not gods. The kings and the emperors, they had gods, but they weren't gods themselves. But they couched it in this context. Look, nobody has their gods back. What if everybody worships you for just a short time? A temporary decree where we all worship you, and that's going to solve this problem that they don't have a God in their temple, and we'll worship you. It will unify the kingdom, civil and religious unrest. It will bring us together as the plan was for the plain of Dura with that image set up. Let's do that. Now Darius knew that he wasn't a god. The Persian kings knew that they weren't God. They had gods, but they weren't gods. But based on the religious and political unrest, Darius must have thought, this makes a lot of sense. For the next 30 days, we can unify the kingdom. That will give enough time for the gods to get out to the kingdom. And we'll go back to worshiping like we always have. But for a temporary time, we need to put an order in place that will unify the kingdom, because this political unrest is getting out of hand. The religious people are angry that their gods aren't in their temples. When Daniel learned that the decree had been published, he went home to his upstairs room where the windows opened towards Jerusalem. 3 times a day, he got down on his knees and prayed, giving thanks to his God, just as he had done before. Let me just hang on those few words for a moment. Daniel, in a time of crisis, did exactly what he had always done before. Do you catch the significance of that? Some of us are sitting around waiting. Hey, just tell me when like laws and stuff get tough and we need to stand up and be faithful for God. I'm there. You won't be there. Quite frankly, you won't be there unless you're there now. You can fake all you want that you can talk big all you want. But the reality of the situation, and it's proven time over time over time, your faithfulness begins today. Your faithfulness to the God of heaven begins right now. And if you are unwilling to be faithful right now, please don't lie to yourself. At least be honest with yourself. You won't be faithful unless you start today. Daniel did exactly what he had always done before. The crisis, and believe me, when there's a decree from the king that says you will worship only me for 30 days, it could be really nice to just take a 30-day break. After 30 days, Daniel is free again to do whatever he wants. But Daniel is going to be faithful. He purposed in his heart in Daniel chapter 1 and verse 8, and he's still purposing in his heart, I will serve only God. And so he does what he's always done. And he worships God. Catch this. Verse 12. Catch this. So they went to the king and spoke to him about his royal decree after they found Daniel worshiping his God. O king, did you not publish a decree that during the next 30 days, anyone who prays to any god or human being except to you, your majesty, would be thrown into the lion's den? Didn't you do that, king? The king answered, of course. The decree stands in accordance with the law of the Medes and the Persians, which cannot be repealed. Here's the conflict. Yeah, it's so obvious. I can't believe I've read this story so many times and have not seen it. But here is a law enacted that is claimed to be unchangeable, and it is forced upon an eternal law that is unchangeable. Now you have two laws that are in contradiction to each other, both claiming to be unchangeable. Well, if you're a thinking, rational person, let me just put it on the table for you. What are you going to put your money on? One that's only a 30-day law, or one that's been eternal, since forever and forever? Which one are you going to put your money on? If you're a betting person, come on, just which one are you going to put your money on? Of course, the eternal one. But why is it then that we do gymnastics to try to reconcile, well, how I can get done with the temporary law to just get past these exams, or just to keep my job, or just to, so then I can really keep the eternal law? We're doing like backflip pretzel kind of stuff to figure it out in our heads how we can accommodate both laws. You can't do it. The laws are in conflict with each other. They're both claiming to be unchangeable, but when you put them on the table and say, am I going to take a 30-day law, or am I going to take the eternal law? It's a no-brainer. It should be. But the devil packages it in such a way that says, come on, it's not a big deal. You take a 30-day break. I coincidentally conclude from this passage, this narrative, that in the final plays of Earth's history, when laws are enacted that restrict our freedom, they will be temporary laws. And that will make them all the more appealing for people to say, come on, just go along with it for a little while, 30 days, and we can return to what we've always done, keeping the Sabbath holy. Come on, it's just for a few weeks. It's not a big deal. And if we have played it out with our jobs and relationships and our schooling and done the gymnastics that have excused us from holding the Sabbath sacred, then it will come to that point in time when it's just a temporary change again. Hey, come on. 3 months from now, we can be back to normal. they're just trying to solve some political unrest and religious disunity. That's a good thing, right? To bring countries back together. I mean, that's a good thing, right? Oh, sure, that's a good thing. And it's only temporary, right? Yeah, it's only temporary, right? Okay, so, I want to be a good citizen, and it's only temporary, so I'll participate because, do you see how it can be packaged in such a way that it's not a big deal, that to many of us, we could just play it off as something, just do it for the sake of our people, our friends, and then we can get back to what we know is right. Daniel saw it. He saw the conflict. A temporary law claiming to be unchangeable. The Persian law could not be changed. But he knew God's law could not be changed. He said, I'm sorry, there is a law that predates this by eternity that says it can't be changed. I'm sorry, I'm going to do what I've always done and be faithful to the eternal law. Oh. Well, it can't be changed. It can't be repealed. All right. They take Daniel. He has to now face the consequences. They arrest him and they throw him into the den of lions. I think this story's kind of cool. On a continent that gets to claim to be home to the lions. Come on. It's a den of lions. Unfed. When that stone is rolled back from the top of that cave, that den, those lions know that shaft of light is their cue. Breakfast is being served. They know the signal. So the stone is removed. Daniel is thrown down. That next morning, I'm missing my verse. Here it is, Daniel chapter 6 and verse 20. When he came near, this is Darius, at the first light, it says, verse 19, at the first light of dawn, the king got up and hurried to the lion's den. Now, why would the king hurry to the lion's den? He knows what happens in those lion's dens. They've played this out over and over again. You throw somebody in, it's over. The next morning, you don't hurry to the lion's den, except something, because of what he knows about Daniel, has been nagging him. Oh, could it be that Daniel's God? Apparently, Daniel's testimony has already stood. And Darius already knows what God can do for Daniel. Because he hurries to the den the very next morning at the first light of dawn, hurries. When he came near the den, he called to Daniel. Who calls out to a man who's been in a den of lions for the last 12 hours? But Darius calls out in an anguished voice. Daniel, listen to what he calls out. Servant of the living God, has your God, whom you serve continually, been able to rescue you from the lions? Let me just pause right there and say, part of the reason I tell you to lay off of your complaints and your accusations against presidents and popes and kings is because some of them are putting things into place that they don't even know the ramifications of. They will actually side with us in the end. Darius didn't understand how he was played. There was a power behind the scenes that played it out, and there will be powers behind the scenes that play out scenarios. These visible leaders will do things that they don't even understand the ramifications of. And I wonder if we are faithful in our testimonies and faithful to God, if some of them won't recognize it and in the end come to the places of persecution and say, Daniel, servant of the living God, whom you serve continually. Listen to Darius' language. He knows Daniel continues to serve God. Has he rescued you from the lions? Daniel answered, may the king live forever. My God sent his angel, and he shut the mouths of the lions. They have not hurt me, because I was found innocent in his sight, nor have I done any wrong before you, your majesty. It pulled him out because he had been faithful. I don't know what the picture of this in your mind is. I've read enough storybooks to have several pictures. Most of them are very similar. Let me describe what the picture looks like. When an artist depicts this Daniel in the lion's den, it depicts Daniel kind of standing there stoically with a beam of light shining down on him, and the lions kind of laying here and there on some rocks, just kind of everybody's waiting it out. That's not exactly what the Bible describes. You got this? Verse 22. My God sent his angel and he shut the mouths of the lions. All he did was shut their mouths. The lions then continued to pace and to pursue, but their mouths were closed. And so all through the night, Daniel felt the hot breath and the low growl of hungry lions. They wanted him. Daniel didn't stand there and say, "There's no problem here." Through the night, through this time of testing, we're going to hear about that. Through the time of testing, Daniel stayed in a state of prayer, wondering if at any moment the lions would take him. We think of it as just kind of this Daniel kind of, when are they going to pull me out of this thing? No. Through this time of peril and trial, the lions stalked him. Their mouths were just pinched closed, but you know what? This is a true story. Several years ago, I was here in South Africa for a camp meeting. It wasn't here at Youth Fest. It was up in Joburg area. And some wonderful people took me out on a little safari, not at the Kruger, at a smaller game reserve. And we're walking. At one point, you're driving around, of course. At one point, you get to this kind of marsh pond area, and you enter into a gated parking lot, and you can go out on a gated dock and just kind of look and see if there's wildlife. And in the water, there's a baby, what is it, a crocodile? Is that we have? Baby crocodile, yeah. And it's sunning itself, and while it's sunning itself on some reeds, a large lizard, comes and clamps onto it. And the baby crocodile begins to cry out to kind of this squeak squawk crocodile call. And the lizard has its hold on the crocodile's abdomen area, and it's holding it, and it's obviously pursuing some sort of meal. And but the baby crocodile is calling out. And the people that were with me, that were just on the dock watching this, they said, that's a problem for the lizard, because the cry from this baby will attract the mother, or an adult crocodile, and an adult crocodile is just going to be able to handle the lizard, no problem. Well, sure enough, the lizard moved its bite up until it had its bite on the snout of the baby crocodile. And they said that's exactly what it has to do to survive, because it knows that if the cry keeps going out, it will lose its lunch and even its life. The little crocodile, right? It's got its snout bit, but it's still going. And I picture these lions, the angel holding its hands over the snout of these lions, but the lions go and kind of sticking out the side as the angel clamps down. That's the picture. Must have happened. The angel shut the lion's mouth. It did not tame the lion. We kind of picture like the angels come and go, good boy, just lay down there. Good boy. Good key. That's not what happened. The lions remained lions. The lions remained a threat, but the threat was neutralized as the angel held the mouth. Daniel chapter 7 now. So we have Daniel chapter 6, the story. And then Daniel chapter 7. Daniel has his first vision. Now he's had a vision that confirmed Nebuchadnezzar's vision, but now this is Daniel's first vision. And he sees the winds of strife and 4 beasts paralleling the metals of the image of Daniel chapter 2. Daniel chapter 7 is just a repetition and enlargement. It talks about those same powers. First beast, second beast, third beast. But the 4th beast is terrible and dreadful, and it has 10 horns that represent 10 kingdoms, and then 3 of those are uprooted by a little horn, a unique horn that kind of comes out and forces its way out. And in Daniel chapter 7, this word dominion is repeated over and over and over and over. 5 times this little horn seeks dominion. This 4th beast seeks dominion. And then at some point, this power, he will speak against the Most High and oppress his holy people and try to change the set times and laws. Just let me try to convince you. Daniel chapter 7 happens chronologically before Daniel chapter 6. But before we get to Daniel chapter 7, in this vision, this scary time of trying to change God's times and laws, Daniel tells us the story of Daniel chapter 6 so that we can know how it plays out, that it's going to be okay. Those who stay faithful to God's law will be saved from the lions' mouths. It's going to be scary. But there will be a power that rises up. Oh, I know we liked it. Well, just tell me who and when. Just tell me who and when. We could do that. We could do that. But I feel like it would digress because the focus that we are on today is the how. How are we going to journey through this? Forget who it is. Daniel 7 verse 25, he will speak against the Most High and oppress his holy people and try to change set times and laws, just like the Persian Empire did. Hey, we need to set a law, a temporary law, but we need only to worship the king. Well, for Daniel, that says that I can't do that. That goes against an unchangeable law. Well, the Persians said, sorry, that's our law is unchangeable. You can't change our law. There's no exceptions here. So Daniel says, well, do what you have to do, but I am going to put my money on the eternal and not the temporary. So what does God do in this cosmic conflict, this apocalyptic scenario in which his laws are challenged? What does he do? As I looked, Daniel said, thrones were set in place in the Ancient of Days. Only time in Scripture that it's given this title, but it's a powerful title. Took his seat, and the court was seated, and the books were open. What happens here? What happens here? The Ancient of Days sits down, takes his seat. He's going to make some decisions. This is God's response to the confusion and to the questions of his law. He convenes his court and says, all right, court. All right, judges, we're going to gather together and once and for all settle the matter. And the court of heaven convenes. We've always thought of the judgment as some sort of attack on us, where we're kind of put through the ringer to see if we have one sin left. Strike out. Oh, we do need to be faithful in everything. But in the context of Daniel, the judgment is set and is presented as God's rebuttal against the attack on him. It's It says, I'm going to clarify some things in this universe. You're wrong. He brings together his court. Hans Lorndell, I've told you about the book, How to Understand End Time Prophecies. Hans Lorndell, Daniel's narratives of religious loyalty to God's sacred law by a few faithful ones provide the essential types or prefiguration of the nature of the final crisis for God's people in the end of time. This is how it's going to play out. Daniel chapter 6, you can read it and read it and read it, and it will be play by play how this thing ends. Civil and religious unrest, tribalism and divisions. And somebody comes up with an idea. Hey, what if we unify ourselves and worship only one direction for just a temporary time? It will bring us all back together, and then we can go back to do whatever we want. This doesn't have to last forever. It's just a temporary order. And it's unchangeable. You can't alter it. The problem is that will fly in the face of an eternal, unchangeable law. What about this judgment? What about this final generation and the people that are faithful to God? They will live like Daniel, faithful. Of course, we are going to be faithful. Oh. They could find no corruption in Daniel. I think I have the verse right here. They could find no corruption in him. He was trustworthy, neither corrupt nor negligent. This is Daniel's testimony. 3 times a day he got down on his knees and prayed, just as he had always done. He was faithful in his relationship with Jesus. Darius called out and gave this testimony of Daniel. Daniel, servant of the living God, has your God, whom you serve, continually been able to rescue you from the lion's den? Yes, said Daniel. They have not hurt me, because I was found innocent in his sight, nor have I ever done any wrong before you, your majesty. This is the testimony of God's faithful people. Radical. Come on, Daniel, just play along for a little while. No, I will stand faithful, and his testimony has stood. It's a couple of lines I want to take you to, and then we're done. Great controversy. Though God's people will be surrounded by enemies who are bent upon their destruction. Now just listen to how Daniel chapter 6 sounds so familiar. Yet the anguish for which they suffer is not a dread of persecution for the truth's sake. They fear that every sin has not been repented of. Daniel wasn't afraid of the lions. He was afraid that he would set a bad example of God. That he would in one way be unfaithful. And that's why he says, Darius, I've been faithful in everything. I've searched my heart. I've searched my heart with God, and I've searched my heart for how I've lived for you and others. I am innocent. I am innocent. You want to know, is my life like Daniel's? Is my life, it's like, we make this a confusing question. Is my life like Daniel's? Well, let me just ask you, and I'm going to ask you, this is going to be part of our Sabbath conclusion to the life of Daniel. But let me ask you it right now. Do you wonder if your life is like Daniel's? Here's the one question that you can know. Is there anything in your life right now, anything that comes to your mind that you have not given up? Is there any sin? Now, I'm not talking about a righteous man stumbles, says Proverbs. A righteous man stumbles. But is there something in your life that you know God has asked you to give up that you have been unwilling? An addiction? An entertainment? Friendship? Disobedience? Dishonesty? Lust? Yeah, it's not a big thing. I mean, I don't hurt anybody. It's just on my computer. It's just, is there anything that comes to your mind right now when I ask you, is there anything that God has asked you about that you have not been willing to give up? In the quietness of your mind, you say, well, there's just that one little thing. Then, yep, you've got something to talk to God about. You've got something to give up. It's not a complicated question. Is there something that comes to mind right now? Am I faithful in everything? Have I given God everything? No, well, except for that relationship, because I don't want him to touch that. Except for that addiction, because that's kind of my one crutch, my one thing that I hold on. Daniel knew that he was innocent. You too, and I too, can know that we are innocent. We just play it off like, well, how do I know if I'm innocent? I mean, who can really know if they're innocent? I mean, that's just a difficult question. No, it's not. Are you innocent? You know if you're innocent or not. And if you're not, go to your knees and give it to Jesus. The dread, though, is not of persecution. We don't have to worry about persecution. We have angels that close lions' mouths. We're fine there. What the angels can protect us from the lions, what the angels cannot do is confess for us. So our greatest concern, I know there's this whole thing about persecution. We're going to talk about that, and we're just going to disabuse the whatever's been put into our heads about some sort of scary persecution. It's not the persecution that Daniel was afraid of. Am I right with God? That's the part the angel couldn't do. The angel can clamp the lion's mouth closed, but it can't confess for you. It can't correct your life. You've got to be the one that gives that up. But the question is, will the Lord forget his people in the trying hour? And then there's a bunch of rhetorical questions. Did he forget faithful Noah? Nope. Did he forget Lot when the fire came? Nope. Did he forget Joseph surrounded by idolaters in Egypt? Nope. Did he forget Elijah when the oath of Jezebel threatened him with the fate of the prophets of Baal? Nope. Did he forget the three worthies in the fiery furnace? Nope. Or Daniel in the den of lions? Nope. Will he forget you? Nope. That's how it is. God has promised that he will be with his people as long as they are willing to be with him. I got the lions, God says. I just need your heart. That's the part I can't force. I won't force. It's a relationship of love, and so unless you let me have your heart, your whole heart, I won't take it. A couple of months ago, when I got out of college and I was working full-time, I was single, I was making all of this money and I had no one that made me share it with them. and so I said, what should I do with all of my money? And I said, you know what, I'm gonna buy a brand new car. And I'll have this car for years and years to come through whenever I get married. So I didn't pick out a little sports car. I picked out a very practical car, an SUV that had enough seats for children when they would come, and try to pick out a color that would be neutral enough that a future wife would be comfortable riding in, and got a car. For nearly 2 decades, I had that car, this SUV. This last summer, last spring, as time goes, it started to become a little unreliable for longer trips, and so I had to sell it. Funny story, and I'll tell you without trying to throw him under the bus. I'm selling it online, and I'm meeting these people that want to buy it at a church parking lot. And my youngest comes with me. He says, "Hey, can I come with you, Daddy, to sell the car?" Sure. So he comes up and he's playing with some airplanes with some wheels on them, and he's just kind of playing around. And I'm talking to the people, and I've got my back to the car that they've just looked at, and they've said, "Oh, we kind of like it. Okay, we're good." And I'm talking to them, and all of a sudden I see kind of both of their eyes go, and their mouths kind of drop. Whoa! And I turn around to find my offspring, my youngest offspring, flying his jets down the side of my car as a landing strip, and they've got a trail all the way down my car. I said, well, and so I had to drive my car home that day. But anyway, eventually sold it, and right before we sold it, Melanie and I are going through the car. You know, after almost 20 years of owning a car, there's some surprises in the bottom depths of your car. I like to pride myself in a pretty clean car, but we were digging through it, and you find an old rusty coin or a hair barrette or something, and a cracker, and all of these things, and deep in the recesses of the car is this crumbled card, like the size of a credit card. It's a gift card, but it's not a plastic gift card like we do now. It's a cardboard gift card. So it's crumbled and messed up, and we're throwing it all in this little trash bag, and we're cleaning it out. And as I walk the trash bag to the trash can, I see this crumbled up gift card, and I think, wow. I mean, okay, it's worth a try. So I take it out and put it in my pocket, and later I'm in the house, and I pull it out, and I kind of straighten it out, and I get the numbers and the website, and and the card, based on the graphics on it, is clearly from our wedding. It was a gift card for our wedding that had happened years earlier. And so I thought, well, we must have, after we used it, it got lost in here. Something. I put in the numbers into the website that's on the card, and up pops, which item would you like? And it starts listing off all of these relatively expensive items. You take your pick. I take my pick. And then what? What's it going to charge me? Would you like to have it shipped? 0 balance. Whoa. Click. Days later, we received a package in the mail. Here's the point. Did God forget Elijah? How about the 3 worthies? How about Daniel in the lion's den? Those narratives stand as promises, and though they've been crumpled and they are now old stories, just like the gift card, the value of God's word is just as real today, if you want to cash it in, as it was when Daniel went into the lion's den. It still has its value. Like the gift card, crumpled and lost for years in my car. It kept its value. The stories, the promises of God are just as valuable and real today if you're willing to live for them. God's word hasn't changed. God's word hasn't changed. He hasn't changed the value of what he's offering, nor has he changed the value of the invitation he's extending. I don't know. What about you? You guys want to be faithful? You want to just say, I want to be a Daniel. I want to be a Daniel, and I want to live faithfully so God can do crazy cool things like he did for Daniel. Oh, Father in heaven, there is coming a time when the laws of the Persians will come as unchangeable, but they will come in contradiction to the law, the sacred law that we know already exists. It's existed from eternity past and will exist into eternity future, and it is unchangeable. And no matter what that little horn tries to do to change times and laws, we have decided today that we will be faithful in the little things. And so when we stand in the lion's den and you send your angel to close the mouths of the lions, we will be able to say to Darius, "Oh, Darius, we have been innocent in God's sight, and we've been innocent before you. We have done no wrong. We have given all of our lives." And God was able to do what he wanted to do because of our faithfulness. Give us that courage to stand though the heavens fall. In the name of Jesus. Amen.